Hey everyone, Pastor Tim here. We're launching our study in The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn. In this first week, we're looking at pretty much everything up through the end of chapter 1. So preface, introduction, and chapter 1. And what I'm going to do each week in these videos is just offer some thoughts and reflections and give you maybe some questions to consider as you go through the book individually and also as you discuss it with other people as well. So I'll be working through the revised and updated version. So if you have one of the older versions of this book, then just heads up because the page numbers might be a little bit different. Let me jump right into it. In the preface, the updated 2017 edition, he notes that this book's been translated into Chinese, Bengali, Croatian, lists a bunch of other languages. And I just wrote down the line, clarity is needed. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to study this book as a church, is to get clarity around this issue of money, because it can be such a controversial issue outside of the church and inside the church. And so the fact that so many people were blessed by, encouraged by, challenged by this book, that it was translated into all these languages, 2 million copies sold, clearly clarity is needed. And so I hope that as you go through the book, you'll gain more clarity on thinking biblically about money. On page, it's page 13 of the preface, XIII, he says at the top there, what I intended for this book was mainly to be about is enhanced joy from giving. And I really appreciate that even in the preface, because that reminds us that this book is not meant to be a book that's like, I'm going to guilt you into reading, I'm going to guilt you into giving, I'm going to guilt you into generosity. It's an opportunity for joy. And so I want to encourage you and challenge you to continue to read the book with that in mind. And let me just ask you the question to consider for yourself. When you think about finances, not specifically giving or tithing or anything like that, but when you think about finances, is it a joyful topic? Is it stressful? Is it overwhelming? What is it for you? Now, clearly he's going to talk about the joy of giving and the joy of generosity, but just think about the topic of money in general for you. Is that a joy-filled topic, or is that a really challenging topic? That's something good for us to think about individually and then also to discuss with somebody else. Now, if you go over to chapter 1 at the beginning, he quotes Jim Elliot, who says, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot to gain that which he cannot lose." And the idea is obviously from Jim Elliot, like, give up the things you can't hold on to so you can gain the things that you can always hold on to, right? And he's going to talk about that throughout the book, and in particular in these opening chapters. It is interesting. He notes going into it, page 3, that in fact 15% of everything Christ said relates to this topic more than his teaching on heaven and hell combined. So think about that. Jesus talks more about money than he does heaven and hell. And the reason is there's a correlation, there's a connection between how people engage with, think about money, and their eternal reality, and how they engage in their spiritual life, and how they just live day to day. And so Jesus is giving us the gift of, if we can realize how we think about and engage with money, it's going to have a trickle-out effect into various areas of our lives. And so again, question for you to consider. When you think about money, do you realize that it impacts so many areas all around your life, but also that it is a sign of what's happening internally, right? Jesus talks again and again about a good tree internally leads to good fruit externally. And so where our hearts are, where our minds are, where we sit kind of in our soul with money is going to lead to how we are living our lives. One thing I really did like about the book is that he gets into the opening passages. He talks about investing money well, investing in eternity. And then, before the, let me see what page it's on here. On page 11, he's already gotten to what the treasure principle is. So let me state it clearly. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. So you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And he gives a lot of different kind of explanations or angles to think about that. When I thought about that question, I thought, what a perfect segue out of our series on heaven we did a couple months ago into this, because really I think this is the ultimate question when it comes to our stance on the treasure principle, our stance on resources is, do we truly believe in a place called heaven in which all of our greatest joys, desires, all those things are fulfilled? Because if I'm like, I'm not sure I totally believe in that, I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm going to try to get a lot of fun, joy, happiness, pleasures here on earth, and then maybe I'll get some in heaven. But if I'm like, no, that's where it all is waiting for me, I can send it ahead, I can invest now for eternal returns, then I'm going to live differently. And so I just want to ask you that question. We talked about that a little bit during the Heaven series, but when you think about heaven, when you think about eternity, is there joy? Is there anticipation? Or is it filled with questions and uncertainty? If you weren't around for our Heaven series, I want to encourage you, go back to YouTube, find our Heaven series, and check out those 4 weeks as we looked at the topic of heaven, a bunch of different angles, a bunch of different topics within the idea of heaven. But really, if we don't believe in heaven, and we don't believe that there is a eternal place that has all joy and goodness, ultimately in Christ, and then in all he gives us there, then investing in heaven is going to be really, really challenging for us to do. And I think that's the deeper issue we have to face when we wrestle with this question of the treasure principle. We can't keep it. We can send it on ahead. But I don't want to send it ahead if I don't really think it's going anywhere, right? I'm going to grab onto things here today. Now, I do want to note as we go into the rest of the book, he didn't just say the joy is then. He said the joy is also now. And even in the introduction, he gives a shout out to his wife. He thanks his wife for the fact that their ability to give and to be generous has stirred up just a wonderful sense of joy for them. So let me close with this final question. When you think about generosity and giving, has it been a joyful experience for you to be a giver? When you give financially in particular, I mean, yes, you can give time and energy and those things, but when you give financially, do you find that to be joyful or do you find that to be challenging? And depending on your response, kind of think that through, and then maybe that's something to pray to God about, to wrestle with. Why do I not find more joy in giving? Why do I not find more joy in generosity? All right, so there's some things to ponder and to consider week 1 as we're in this series studying the treasure principle together. In the weekly email, I put the list of kind of how we're going to go through the different chapters in the weeks ahead. We're going to go all the way basically through July and August, but there's a rundown where you can find each week and what you should be reading as you follow along through the summer. So I hope this is a huge encouragement to you. I read this book years ago and loved it. I'm excited to read it again and to have some dialogue with you about it. So blessings to you. We'll see you next week.